So this afternoon we are out feeding in the beautiful sunshine, just pouring this syrup in. The bees are sucking it down. All these nucs to feed, and another load to do, another apiary, another 22 there I think. But what a beautiful day to see all these bees flying. Delighted to see all these bees flying, looking really good. Some really nice sized colonies. There's always a couple that aren't as good as you want, but I mean the colonies here, I'm seeing loads and loads of pollen coming in. Let's have a little look at this. And what I'm seeing as well is the front entrance a little bit stained yellow. You see that? That's a really good sign. And if you can see that slight yellowing just inside the door, that means that the bees are bringing in loads of pollen. They're raising loads of young. So my thoughts on late feeding. I have this year maintained feeding 1-to-1 up till now. This is all 1-to-1 still, and we are now the second week of October. Now I'm probably mad, but I had it already in the drum. I mixed it. It's the thymol treatment that I still want to give as well. So it's two-pronged. This is the thymol treatment from Hive Alive that comes with their feed, and I really like that this time of year because for us here, I'm not saying it's going to work for everybody, but for us here we really do often have very damp winters due to our location. Just look at that, absolutely fantastic. So we have these damp winters, and I am sure since I've started feeding, well, I know my winter losses are less, virtually nothing, nothing last year, and the year before very low. And I didn't feed much thymol the year before. I went back to it last year. The year before that, the winter of 2021-2022, no winter losses either. So we had a really good spring that year. I just can't help but feel that when I feed with thymol, we get amazing results. And there's something about it, and then loads of people in the UK I know feed with thymol every time they feed. Because originally it was Manley's idea that if he put thymol solution into his syrup, it stopped the weak syrup going off. But obviously modern syrup like ambrosia, or the thick syrups we buy from Belgium that we call invert, they do not go off. So for me, I have to actually water down my syrup to more of it's like a 2-to-1 or more when you buy it. There's literally 12 or 18% water in the mix, and it's so thick it doesn't go off, as I just said. But you have to water it down and then add the thymol. And it's not that we want to add the thymol to stop it going off, but it does that as well because it's more liquid. It basically means that the syrup can hold on to the thymol and it mixes much better. As well as that, I'm using the Hive Alive feed because I do like giving bees this feed this time of year. It just sets them off on the right trajectory into the winter, I feel. It doesn't mean that the Hive Alive feed is the best. I'm not saying that. I don't know yet. I can't confirm. I haven't got the scientific data. But any feed, liquid feed you can give them this time of year is probably only going to be a good help, providing you don't overdo it. And so looking at our temperatures as well, the reason why I'm still feeding a 1-to-1 is we've got temperatures of probably 18, 19, 20 degrees well into next week. So next week I'll be feeding the thick syrup, which is like, more than a 2-to-1. And then I'm only going to feed one feeder full, and then I'll just take that down and bung up their nest with what's left. I'm not expecting them to raise brood then. If I can just keep them going, raising brood a little bit more for our location in North Brittany in France, where the UK is pretty much shutting down. Some of my nucs shut down a bit last week. I went in there and they were backfilling. That's fine. That happens with some, but I know the rest are still brooding. Got some really good buckfast queens here and some Carpathian queens and some Carniolan queens. I know they're going to be still brooding because they know it's not just the fact that they know it's getting cold, but they want to raise a big enough amount of bees to survive the winter, and that's the problem we have. So you've got to give the bees that food to do that, or they will shut down. But you've got to give them the right type of syrup. And I maintain that if I feed them the 1-to-1 with this, for now, well, it's not 1-to-1. It's like 1.3, 1.4 to 1. It's weaker than the thick syrup, but it's not quite totally 1-to-1 because that's just the mix I made up. But I'm just super happy to come down here. We've got a window in the weather today, and tomorrow's going to be okay as well. Then we get a bit of a warm spell, but it's going to be mostly cloudy. Just to come down here and see the volumes of bees flying, to me, is excellent. No Asian hornet to speak of here. 1 or 2 every now and again, but virtually nothing. I've got to put all these lids on properly with the rubber bands that are all in front of the hives, and then I'm going to strim here and clean the grass because I want the grass low down over the winter, and it's desperate for it. It's getting way too long again all of a sudden. But the bees are fine now. It's not a problem, but if I do it now, I just think it helps aeration under the hive. I think it helps ventilate the hive over the winter, and I think that is quite an important thing to talk about. Hive ventilation over the winter, there's so much spec on it, there's so many ideas about the best thing to do. On to the right of each nuc, there's a ventilation strip just in line with the first corner of the door there, and that runs, it's about 4 centimeters wide and runs all the way the length of the nuc. Now, those Dadant nucs seem to be about right. They seem to have got it right. They seem to have something that it's not too well ventilated, but not unventilated. And I personally feel I like a ventilated floor, and I'm sure it contributes to a little bit of a delay in swarming in the spring because there's less heat in the colony. I don't know. There's all these theories, and then someone will say to you, yeah, but then the bees just work harder to keep it warmer because they're having to burn more to keep that heat. I see that argument as well. It's such a complicated and complex issue. I don't really know, but I just feel that having the ventilation over the years seems to be a better thing, and it keeps the bottom of the colony drier, it drains better. If I have fixed hives, like there's a couple here, there's a couple of nucs here I've got, actually the same as that one on the ground there. I actually like to tilt them forward over the winter, and so the back is higher than the front. So if there was a build-up of any moisture in the colony, it does drain out. And that is always, all hives you could put on a slope if you wanted to into the winter, if you've got fixed bottom boards. With the beauty of these ones we've got from Nico, as you know, all the plastic ones, and there they are, they're all fully ventilated all winter, and there never seems to be a problem. So I like this time of year. I've got through most of that horrible period where you're shaking out colonies that didn't do anything. You just have to kind of bear with it at that point, because you have no other choice. You can't just say, oh, well, I'm going to leave them now and I'll clear them out later on. Clearing them out later on generally in beekeeping doesn't happen. Put them on the truck, get them home, empty them out, stop the wax moth, chewing them over the winter, and all the rats and mice and everything else getting into them. Get it clean. You generally don't get any mouse problems if you've got strong colonies in 1 apiary. I find you don't. You might have mice around the exterior that might feed off the dead bees, but you generally don't get them attacking the hives. If it's a dead out, then that's a different matter. They'll be straight in there. And those insects, those rodents know that there's a dead out. So that's kind of what I do. I like to keep the grass short because it also means that it's less chance of rodents hiding in the grass, in front of the hives, under the hives, and causing a problem if they do gnaw the polystyrene. But I'm lucky here, we don't have any great green woodpeckers, the ones with the red head. We don't have those here. We have them in the next apiary, but they're only really attacking things where there's an issue. In other words, where they've got the square boxes, they seem to like those. These nucs, they don't seem to go for. I don't know why. So I'm just counting my lucky stars and sticking with that. But as a nuc yard, this is a really good site. It's protected from the southwesterly winds and west. That's sort of south there, southwest, west. So it does get shelter and it gets sun for most of the day. So this is a brilliant nuc yard. Everything seems to do well here and they survive the winter. But I've got to get this grass down. I want that ventilation. I want to get everything how it should be for the end of the year. And the grass has grown crazy this time of year. Just has. You can see how tall it's getting. But there's some great looking pollen going in. That one's a dead out, I think. Nice pollen going in there. Some super colonies. And also I will say as well, this time of year, just go with it. Just do the best you can. Don't worry about it, because there's very little you can actually do now other than remember to keep getting that feed in as and when you can. As I said, we are still brooding here a little bit. We've got another 2 weeks of brooding before they start to shut down. Then they'll keep that colony warm enough to finish that brooding off. And we think that around November time, mid to end of November, is when there's this period of the least amount of brood. Just look at that. That is spectacular. That colony there, you can see they found the pollen, all right? But there's pollen going in everywhere. This says to me, the second or third generation of bees are doing their job, and they're bringing that pollen in. And that is what will get your colonies through the winter. Successive generations of clean bees through those long winter months. Because don't forget, we've basically got about 6 months now, or well, maybe 5, but we always say, oh, within 5 or 4 months the weather will be better. In February, generally the weather isn't better. The bees will be brooding in February here, but they won't be really brooding that we can do anything with until February, till it gets warm enough. But you know, this is just amazing. Looks like I picked the right time to give you some film. Really pleased to see. I've got a few less colonies this year. I think I've got about 85, 90, whereas last year I had about 120. But that's fine. To be able to get my building done, I've just left this morning, and they've just finished the 3rd coat of resin, and that's it. They'll finish today. It's Friday today, so that 3rd coat of resin is done, and now they are clearing up, and it'll be done for the day, and they're taking the tape off. So basically it's finished, and I'm just waiting now for the electrician to come next week, and they're going to come back next week and hang all the doors on the main fridge doors that will go in and really finish the building off. So fingers crossed for that as well. But I've been really lucky as well, because a couple of people have said to me, blimey, how did you manage to get so many workmen through the door in a successive period? Well, to be honest, I don't know. One of the best things you can ever have as a beekeeper in your truck, to me, has to be some hand washing water. It doesn't matter if it's just a small container, it's just to get that syrup off your fingers at the end of it all. And these are all fed, everything. So I'm going to pop up now in a minute and check those. But I've got enough here with me to feed the 25 to 22 maybe nucs at the other apiary, so I'm going off there now to do that. I want all the nucs fed with a 1-to-1, because they're still growing and still trying to push brood. And I'm seeing not many bees in the top, but I'm seeing huge passages of bees, which shows to me that the way I'm thinking is there's loads of forager bees and not many young bees. The young bees are coming, but the bees that are there are all around the brood to keep them warm. And often you'll look into a colony and go, well, that's not very good. But all the bees are actually underneath. You can't see them right now, but in most cases there's absolutely loads of bees just beneath the surface, and everything's fine and dandy. And I've had that every year the same. You can't see many bees on top, but they're all crowding around, raising that brood. That's a bit of a bigger one there, you can see. But they are good, and they will, majority will get through the winter. I don't mind if we have a hard winter. We're going into that period we had last year where it went colder earlier in the autumn, and it was actually warm the rest of the winter. But you know, the bees are flown really well today. Everything's great. This feed that's on top of them now, they're not taking it down quite yet because it hasn't warmed up. They've got the energy and the heat now to warm that syrup up. And that's always been my bugbear, is that people gone about feeding with a feeder. Feed on a shim or something directly above the bees, because that heat rises up into the syrup and warms the syrup, and your bees take it down double speed. They absolutely hate cold syrup. Okay, they always will take it down eventually, but if you can get them down, take it down sooner, a day sooner is a day better ticked off the calendar as far as I'm concerned. These should have been fed a couple of days ago, but I just didn't have a chance and the weather was atrocious. I'm back to the problem now, whereas I'm wondering whether I can get my truck in. We're okay today, and I'm pretty sure we'll be okay at the next apiary because the ground underneath is actually pretty still dry. But you can see the grass is beginning to like wear quickly. So you have to choose a new piece of grass each time to stop on and a new piece to pull away on, if you know what I mean. It's just something to bear in mind. We're getting towards that time now where there isn't any, once we get to that certain point where the ground gets wet, it never gets dry again. Unless you have exceptionally dry winds from the east and sunshine, then you can get into apiaries again in the winter. But it has to be a good 2 weeks. At the moment, because it's dry and it's dry the rest of the week, we're okay. And I've got another apiary to move still from the buckwheat to get back, but it's the 12th one, all accessible, all been fed, treated ages ago. I just need to move them and haven't got around to it. So I'm going to move them and put them into other apiaries to fill up the gaps in those. And that'll probably be tomorrow's job, because today and yesterday the water's draining away. It's nearly all gone now. We've got some sunshine, mostly cloudy tomorrow, which means I'll be able to move those bees later in the afternoon and then move everything out. And then we'll be done there completely. But it's just pushing. It was just to show you how I'm feeding. Everything is getting, as I said, a 1-to-1, a complete rapid feeder full. They'll take that down in the next 2 days, and I'll come back next week and then start feeding the thicker stuff, which will really beef them up. We have got really a month to 3 weeks left yet where they will take feed down safely. No problem at all. And with temperatures up in around the kind of 18, 20, 21 degrees C, for us, that's just the bonus. That's really good drying syrup, weather curing syrup. Okay, I'm making the bees work because I've got to dry this syrup quite a bit, but it mimics a natural flow, which is also on at the moment. You see this, look, forgot to say, there's actually not much robbing going on here because there's actually nectar out there the bees are bringing in on the ivy. It's just over there, the whole valley's full of it. So I know that there's a natural flow out. You can see the ivy here. There it is, going right up that tree. I mean, that's like one of the classic examples of it. Just between, that's mistletoe, by the way. If people don't know what that is, you get that in Brittany a lot because the song thrushes and mistle thrushes eat the seeds off the mistletoe, off one plant, and they poop it out as it goes through their body, and they poop it out onto the limbs of poplar trees. And poplar trees have very soft bark, and then the seed germinates up there or down there, wherever, and then the root goes into the bark, and then the next mistletoe. It's what we call a parasite, but it's more of a saprophyte because it lives with the host. But it does parasitize the tree, and eventually, like apple trees, can succumb to just basically so much mistletoe growing in them that it becomes a nightmare and the tree just fails and it gets too weak. But it's the scourge of Brittany. We get it because it's so wet here, and I think because the air's so damp, when the mistle thrushes are on that fruit, which is like a white berry, it's very, very sticky, but they eat lots of it and they just poop it out all over the trees. It doesn't parasitize things like oaks. It goes for mostly apple trees and poplar trees that are very soft and just the right thing for them to root into. But there you go, a bit of botany there. But that's what we get in Brittany, quite a lot of different things like that, because we are so profoundly damp a lot of the time. And as I said before, things like keeping your apiaries tidy, the grass down, colonies well ventilated, is a very, very good idea to go towards helping your bees for the winter. But thymol has to be one of the #1 things at the moment. I've just found that works for me. So up at the second apiary I just mentioned, to finish off the feeding for today, I fed nearly 40 buckets of syrup, the 1-to-1, and these are really dry. So I'm going to come back here and feed them again. I've got about 10 to 12 buckets of 1-to-1 left, and that will do this. And then I'll come back again next week after and feed them more concentrated syrup. The bees are here are good. These were the late nucs I made, the last batch, and they seem all good. They're actually really strong. So I don't think there's a problem with the bees taking the syrup and storing it. I just think I need to get the syrup in. Whereas with the other colonies, sometimes if they're a bit small, you can't really give them much more than they can take, because they're only able to handle so much, you know, a kind of designated amount. Whereas with a big nuke with 6 frames, which a lot of these are, because they were literally colonies split in half, and then the bees from the 2 supers above were then going back down to replenish the ones I took. In that respect, those nukes always get away really well. But it's that end of the season where you just have to kind of, you just do your best. You feed as much as you can, as much as you feel is economically viable. And then you come away and then you're like, I've done what I can do. Because at the end of the day, bees will forage, but I'm surprised these hives haven't foraged as much as I hoped they would, because they're a little bit more exposed here. We had a really good chestnut harvest here. You might remember these hives I didn't do much with all the summer, and yet they still yielded well. So just a point is to say that some apiaries do that, some don't, and you just have to kind of come in at the right time. This is a week too late. I would have liked to got those nukes fed last week and then given them another feed today. But as I said, it's going to be fine. They're big colonies. They've got a laying queen. They've had the varroa treatments. There's every chance they'll make it through the winter quite well. And the colony size is good. So I'm going to come back probably Monday and feed those, make a note in the diary, Friday today, come back in 2 days. The syrup will be gone. The dilemma is, how quickly do you give them other syrup afterwards? With the thymol syrup, which is the lighter one, I'll have enough to feed this apiary again, and I think I'll do the whole apiary again, certainly the nukes on the Monday, because I know they'll be drying it well, and I know they've got the workforce to dry it and treat it like it's nectar, so they'll keep on brooding. Whereas with the thick syrup, the problem is you can't really just go and pour loads and loads of syrup on, because it just blocks the whole thing up. And if they're still brooding a bit, you need to give them that bit of time. But whatever you do, there's nothing the right answer, nothing the wrong answer. You just got to do the best you feel in your particular area. That's the key to it. This, as I said, in Brittany, we are quite close to the sea. The sea's still warm. We're getting elevated temperatures normally until the second week of November. Then it does go on average 5 to 8 degrees in the day. So that's like, bees don't fly, it's winter. I just hope we don't have the mild winter we had last year. I want bees to shut down. I want frosts, I want cold, I want a normal winter this year. Fingers crossed we get that. Anyway, catch you again soon. Bye for now.